Hi guys, welcome back. This time I want to see how the new Vue.js release changed. So we are going to look at the Vue.js version 3 and how to migrate actually project from version 2 to the version 3. Um, to start of course a migration, the first thing that we need to look at are breaking changes. And from my researches, I see that the version 3 of Vue.js introduced quite a few breaking changes other than some new features. What I want to focus on is just the breaking changes because that's what we need to look at if we want to migrate a project from a real world project. So I will pick from the full 8-hour course that I just recorded on my YouTube channel, and so from the article that I also wrote for FreeCodeCamp, the last project, so the final project of the course, which was the portfolio project that was using Axios, Vue Router, Vue.js version 2, and the GitHub REST API to build a portfolio project. So we will take that as our base, and then we will try to upgrade it and use the version 3 of Vue.js and see what happens when we update CDN and what breaks and how to fix it. But first, I want just I want to go over the documentation and see what has been updated and what has been deleted from the framework, what are the new features. So let's have a quick look. Okay, so let me open the documentation for Vue.js. Let me bring it to the screen. So so this is the documentation for Vue.js version 2. So you see 2x, and then we can go here and then visit the version 3. So from the version 3, if we click on docs and see the migration from Vue 2, we see we see a list of the new features and breaking changes for Vue.js. So of course, the quick start tells you that you can use CDN or use npm as always to build a Vue.js application. And then we are here in the breaking changes section. We see that this section is split into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categories. So the breaking changes are made up in 7 categories. And I think the most important here, which changes actually the way we start building the application. So this change will surely affect all application that you have built, even the most simple application. So from the most simple to the most complicated, this change is going to be reflected in your migration. So what we want to do when we have a new release like this one with lots of breaking changes is go over the documentation and look at what could be a problem for our application. Since we are talking about migrating the project that we have built the last time during the 8 hours course, let me just bring it to the screen so you see what I'm talking about. So it was a simple project. We used Vue Router, Vue.js, and and the GitHub REST API to build this portfolio. If we look at the code from the no, here from the main.js file, we look inside here. We see that we have a couple of Vue routes components. Then down here we have the data object because this is a component. Then we have so it's a function, so it's a data object, but as a function because we are in a component. Then we have the methods, and then we have a bunch of methods, We have the mounted lifecycle hook. We have the way we should define the routes for a Vue router. We see how we instantiated the Vue router, so how we created a new instance of Vue router, and then how we created and mounted the Vue instance using the new Vue um, function constructor. But this time, things changed in Vue.js, and so the first thing that we wanna actually look at is how the global API changed. In fact, the first change that we see here is that the global Vue.js API is changed, so we use now an application instance. So let's first look at this. So the Vue2 used the Vue.component to build a component. Instead, in the version 3, we have the new global API and we have this create app. So it's changing the way we create a new Vue instance. And of course, you will need to read all the documentation to make sure that your application can be updated and what of your application you need to change. But basically, it says that before we were able to use Vue dot and a method or a property, but now this time with Vue with the new syntax for the global API, we need to use this create app, and then we store this application instance on the in a variable, and then from here we use the variable name instead of the Vue object to call every time any of these function or directives, mixings, and so on, all these methods and properties. So it changed, but let's see how it changed. So if we go over the guide and look at getting started, which was actually what we followed in the Vue.js course. So we see that now to create an app, we use a different syntax. So let's see how it's building it. So we have this introduction, but I want to see this application and component instances. So when we create a new application now in Vue.js version 3, we are actually building a root component. We are creating a root component. So as a root component, it has some difference from what we had before. So every Vue application starts by creating a new application instance, which is a new concept in Vue.js. Before we had no application instance, but we have an instance of an object of the Vue object, and we use the create app function. So we still use Vue dot, but then it's followed by create app instead of new Vue. So the syntax that we had in Vue 2. And then in here we still specify the options object, so nothing changed for this bit. So we have a root component. So the option passed to the create app are used to configure the root component, and then we need, of course, to mount this component. So what we see here is that it's defining the options object separately in a variable, but then it creates a new application instance using the Vue.createApp, and then it passes the root component in here, which is the same as passing directly this object inside this parenthesis of the method createApp. And then next is mounting the root element, so a div within a div app to the app instance, and that should pretty much do it. So now so now this time, since we are talking about a root component, so the main Vue instance, the main Vue application is now a component. And since it is a component, it's also changing the way we can define the root object, because as we used to work inside inside components, we no longer had the data object, but we had data function which returned an object, and this time is the same. So that's one of the major changes. So it really changes the basics of how we create a new instance. So I think that this kind of breaking change will, of course, break any application because we used to create a new Vue instance in the other way. So following the syntax for Vue.js 2. Let's open up Vue guide version 2 and let's see the difference very quickly. So Vue instance here is the Vue instance for version 2, and you see we use the new Vue, so Vue, the Vue function constructor, and then we create a new instance of the of this class, and then we store it. We store the object inside the variable, and then we of course pass the options object and do all the things that we normally do inside the options object. So this time things are quite different. So this is one of the breaking changes that we must consider if we want to migrate our application to Vue 3. And then let's see what else we need. Okay, there are a bunch of new features, the composition API, teleport fragments. I'm not going to go through this just now. I might do a separate video series for all the new features that Vue 3 brings in. But what else I want to see is that, okay, we have some more changes, breaking changes inside the template directives category. So V model used inside components has been reworked, and I'm not sure this is going to affect our application. And let's see if we actually did use V model on a component. I think we did not. Let's inspect the code. So I need to open the main.js file. Okay, so I don't see any beyond directive in here. vModel directive. In fact, we have no vModel directive. Okay, so this change can be ignored because I have not used vModel on a components, so I'm not being affected by this. So key usage on template v4 and on v4 nodes has changed. We know we have not used template v4 for our simple application. Vif and v4 precedence when used on the same element has changed. Okay, of course, for each of these changes, you click in here and then you see the specific changes and so other nodes from the Vue developers, but I already know that this is not going to affect our application because I've never used v4 and v on the same element. Let's see if it's on the same element of the v4. No. Okay. So this change can be ignored. So vbind is now order sensitive. So vbind and then passing an object is ordered sensitive, and we have not used this approach either. So it's binding the ID to a property, so to a name, to a value here, which replaces the original one or vice versa, but we did not use it, so we can ignore this. What else? I'm quite sure our application doesn't use much of this of these things because we build a very simple application which is for a beginner course. So vbind, so it's not affecting the Vion event native modifier has been removed and we have never used it. Ref inside before no longer registers an array of refs, we did not use it, so we can move to the next step. So if you know your application upside down, so you know everything of the application you want to migrate, you have an easy life. Because it's going to be very quick for you to check what is going to be broken after you upgrade. So you upgrade the version of Vue.js. But if you don't, you might have to do lots of researches read your code or the documentation for your code and see what of these breaking changes will actually break your application. So let's see for components, functional components. We've not used them, neither this one. I think component is not the case, and component 7 should be declared with the emits options. So this is quite interesting. We did not use for this project, we did not use emit on a component to make the parent component aware of this event. But let's see, let's search for emit. Okay, there is no emit, so we did not use it. But I'm quite sure that in many of your applications you would have used the emit. So this is one of the changes that you must look into before doing the migration. So this is as important as the other changes to the global API, because if you are working with components, sure enough, you have used these emits. And this is interesting because now the component that emits an event can also specify what kind of events it can define and expose to the parent component. So that's going to be quite useful, like props. So we can define a property inside the component and then specify as an array what kind of events this subcomponent needs to expose to its parent component. So that's quite interesting change. And then let's see, render function, we did not use this, but if you have, you need to look into this. Custom elements neither. So the destroyed life cycle option has been renamed unmounted. Okay, the before destroy has been renamed to before unmount. Okay, props default factory. Okay, we don't need of this. Custom directive API changed to online with component life cycle. Okay, the data option should always be declared as a function. This is going to affect our application. The data option from mixins is now merged shallowly. Okay, this is not going to affect us. Attribute coercions, neither. Some transitions, neither. So when watching an array, callback. Okay, we don't care about this. Mounted application does not replace the element that the element it's mounted to. We don't care about this. So lifecycle look, event prefix changed, we don't care. So things that's been removed from the API. So the list that I just went through is just about the other minor changes. And then we have move APIs, so things that are no longer available in Vue3, and global function set and delete. Okay, we have not used any of these. So our application, as I said before, was very simple because it's a beginner course, so we have not implemented many of these things. The only two things that really will affect our application are is the fact that data options is now the data options now must be defined as a function, like we normally do with components, but that's no big deal. And then the other problem was the way the global API changed the Vue instance. So let's see what else we need to update when we try to. So you of course need to make a plan if your application is quite complicated. In this case, our application is simple, so I can just migrate directly. Also, because the application is using the CDN, things will be much simpler for you to follow along. So let's open my So this Vue folio funnel project for the Vue.js 8 hours course, which is, by the way, available on FreeCodeCamp. So you will be able to read the full article on FreeCodeCamp. I will leave a link in the description of the video, and of course you will find a full playlist on my YouTube channel. Next, let's quickly, let me first clone this repo. Let's copy this link. You can, if you want to follow along and just practice with these migration steps, you can follow me. So just clone this repo. Of course, you will need to know how to use Git, but if you don't, you can surely find a tutorial on FreeCodeCamp. So let's clone this one and let's clone it inside the Vue folio folder. So I'm cloning the full repo, which is now available inside this folder once it finishes. Okay, now it's done. So the first thing that I will probably do is update the CDN link for Vue.js. And let's see what happens when we do that. Let's grab from the guide link for the CDN. So installation, getting started. CDN, okay, we can use Vue next, should be fine, but if I'm not wrong, we could specify also the version that we want to download, that we want to use from the CDN. It's fine. Okay, so let's install it and take this script tag and replace it in the code. So let me first open up the application with live server, so you can see what we are talking about. So it's just a simple application. I got a big zoom, but if you reset the zoom, that's how it will look like. So you can click on this link. It will redirect you to a different page where you will see all the projects from a GitHub account. And then you click load more, it will load more project until it reaches 20 projects, and then it will leave you a link to the GitHub account of the user that you are you linked. So that's how the application works. Let's open up the inspector and let's see what happens when we try to upgrade the version of Vue.js. So that's the Vue.js. That's not gonna, I think it's not the development version from the repo, should be updated to the production. But anyway, okay, we see that as soon as I update the CDN, we got an error. We got a couple of errors actually, and both errors are not related yet to to our Vue.js application, but they are related to the Vue router because when Vue.js rewrote the application, so for the release of the version 3, also all the libraries connected to this to Vue.js, like Vue Router, had to update their code base to support the new changes, breaking changes, and new features. So depending on how many libraries you are using, you might have to look at all the libraries and see what are their recommendation for the migration. So if we open Vue Router, and there is a link, so if we visit Vue Router, you will see that it says somewhere, let me see if I can find it quickly. Sure, it was here. Okay, migration from Vue2. There is an entire section that talks about the breaking changes and what has been added to this new version of Vue Router. As you see, I'm visiting the documentation for the version 4x. So version 4 of Vue Router has made some changes, and if you want to migrate from Vue 2, you need to upgrade also the version of Vue Router. The main breaking change that will affect our application, I believe this one, because this is the new way of creating a new router instance. Let's check. There is a new history option that replaces the mode. Then move to the base option. We don't care about this. Remove the star or catch all routes. Okay, replaced already and is ready. We don't care about all this. Router view, we use this. Router view and transition, keep anonymous include inside. Okay, we don't care. Removal and append prop in router link. We have never used this append in our application, if I'm not wrong. We'll double check before moving forward, but I'm sure we did not use it. Removal of event and tags. Okay, the list is quite long. So you will need to look at every single piece and see if your application is affected by any of these changes. In case it's not, you can move forward. If it is, you need to fix all the bugs that you will find along the way while you're trying to upgrade. So let's see very quickly how the getting started changed. So from my understanding, so this is the scripts that we need to import, and we have a Vue Router script right here, so we can update this one. So this part is quite the same, nothing changed really. But then in the JavaScript section, so define the route components, it looks the same. The routes looks the same. The only difference that I can quickly see is the way the router instance has been created. In fact, this was one of the breaking changes. And since we are using the CDN, we have access to this Vue Router object, and then we can call this method and pass to it this object with all the properties that we need to define to create a new router instance. So this is going to be I think the main change. Then here you see that is using the new way to create a Vue instance for our Vue application. So it's creating Vue, it's using Vue.createApp. And then the other difference is this one, because before in Vue 3, to make the application aware that we want to use Vue Router, we had to inject inside the options object the routes, instead the router instance. Instead, now we use on the application instance, we use this method use, and then we pass to it the router object, and then we mount the application. So this is these are the main changes that we want to apply to our application. So let's go back to the code and see what we need to change. So we updated this the script for the version 3, and that should be still a development version. And then let me go back here and grab this link to the CDN for Vue.js version, Vue Router version 4, and here we are. Okay, so now we have both things updated, and if we try to go back, we will see still the same error, because it says now that Vue Router is not a constructor. So we can no longer use Vue Router as a constructor because it's changing like the Vue instance is changed. So let's see what else we need to do. Let's open the JS file. So this is different, and we know that for sure, because this is the way, the old way, so the Vue.js 2 way to create the new instance. So we no longer do that, but we use create app, and then we pass something to hit. But if I'm not wrong, also this part changed. So let's quickly go back to the documentation and check the difference. So this is using app.mount to mount the application instance as explained in the application and component instances in Vue.js version 3. So Vue.create to create the instance, and then you can use Vue.mount, app.mount like that to mount the application instance. Okay, so let's do that. So we get rid of these, just the router instance, I think, because we need to use actually. So then we do app.mount without the $sign, and we keep using this. We still have to use the selector to specify the root element of our application. And then if I'm not wrong, a router should be passed as value of use. So this is the new way to create the application instance. And then now this is no longer available as a function constructor. So we need to use Vue Router dot create routes, if I'm not wrong. Let's check. Create router. Okay, so that's the function, the method that we need to call. And we do that. Okay, so now we created the new instance, and the rest is quite the same. So it still says that we can use the short version of defining a property and value inside the object, simply using the variable that contains values, and if this is the same as the key, or so the property name is the same as its value, we can simply use the variable name, and we'll do that for us. And then history changed. We did not use it, if I'm not wrong. Let's see if we don't put this in place, and let's see what changed. So as it is, it should be working fine without errors, because the rest is just plain JavaScript, and this is inside the component, this is inside the projects component, and this is inside the home component. So these are the two routes components. These components will be shown by Vue Router as the view of the page. So let's see if it's fine now. Okay, we have to provide, so we have an error. We have to provide the history option when calling create router. Okay, so this is now mandatory. We cannot omit this. Okay, let's do it. So in here we say this, and we should be good to go. And let's refresh the page very quickly and see if there is any error that we did not see. Okay, it seems that everything is working fine. Can we go to the home page? Yes. And can we go to the main projects page? Yes. Okay. So the project seems to be working correctly. Can click on load more, and more projects become available. Then we can click this link, and you see from here that it will point us to the GitHub account for this user. And that's pretty much done. So the migration was quite easy, because of course our application was very simple, and we only had to update a couple of things really. So the way the Vue instance has been created, and the way the Vue Router instance has been created. So these were the only two things that we had to change. The rest, it's still the same. And of course we had to change the links inside the HTML file that points to the CDN. So this way now everything works, and works fine. And that's all I got for you today. So if you enjoyed the video, thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel and enable notification if you want to know when my next video is online. And take care, guys. Cheers.